Hello, Nadine. How are you doing? Welcome, and thanks for being here today in our recording session for the Wellness Lab podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, as we always do, I would like to pass you on the microphone to know who you are, what you've been doing to help others for mental health support, and know more about your personal background history, what brought you to this place, and how you're helping others.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for your curiosity. First of all, that's a big part of what I do is staying curious with people. So I come from actually a background of lived trauma experience. So I grew up in a home, an abusive home with a mother that experienced mental health. So my childhood wasn't exactly ideal. And I didn't go through a lot of different aspects of trauma. So there was emotional trauma, mental trauma, physical trauma. I actually did experience sexual trauma growing up, not from my primary parent, but from family members. So I've been through a lot. And what I wanted to do with that is I wanted to learn how to, first of all, do my healing work. So like, I think it's really important as a practitioner to say to people that there's a lot of people that go into social work or that go into therapy because they want to help other people, but sometimes the piece that they skip is their own healing journey. Whereas for me, it was really important for me to do my healing before I actually tried to sit with clients and help them, because if I didn't kind of look at it in that approach, then really all I'm doing is trying to take my trauma to save other people because I don't want them experiencing what I had to go through, which is a truth. But then it's also requires you to do the healing work. So I've done a lot of healing in my life. I've done a lot of therapy and different types of therapy over the years. And then what I did was I decided like, okay, how can I make the best of this? So I became a counselor. So I'm an intuitive counselor. And what that means is that I use a lot of my intuition and reading of people in sessions to actually help them to do the work that they need to do in their lives. A lot of what I do is through intuition. So a lot of people kind of joke around with me and ask me if I'm psychic a lot, which is really funny. But it's just, I've just gotten really good at reading people. And that's also from the trauma that I went through, right? You become very hyper vigilant, you start picking up on cues. So I've really found a way and a space inside myself where I understand that the trauma happened for me and not to me. So when I was able to come to that understanding in my line of work, it just made everything that I did so much easier and so much that people could actually identify with me. So the other piece about what I do is that I believe in the relationship that you have with a counselor or a therapist is the most important building block. Because if you go into someone's office and they have all these accreditations on the wall, but they're not really like sitting with you in your trauma and really there with you, I think that sometimes that can prevent people from doing the work. So what I've tried to do in my line of work is really change the dynamic and the way that people look at the relationship that they have with their counselor or therapist. So that's been another building block that I use in my line of work, is just helping people to understand that you're not coming to me because I have power over you. You're coming to me because we're going to have power with each other. And that's how we do the work, right? I think it's really important for practitioners to understand that humanistic approach, and that, you know, empathy and compassion are really important in sessions that we do with one another, because really at the end of the day, it's we're all just walking each other home, right?
Amazing. Thanks for sharing some of your personal background, the story behind how you became the person who you are today, and how you have empowered yourself and empowering others to change things and probably switch courses. I feel when you are put into a situation that probably is not what you're looking for, you didn't expect to happen, you have to shift the focus or the way you saw it, or when you lived it, into how you can make things work better or learn from the experience to just become stronger and
Mhm.
heal from it.
Well,
So
and that requires like a large piece that people don't talk about is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? When you're doing your healing work, I think a lot of people like kind of want to stay away from the emotional aspect of it. And I think that's another piece that we kind of need to talk about in terms of like pillars, is that like I get put into like the mental health component a lot, but what I actually do is a lot of emotional intelligence and a lot of emotional health, because it's one thing to cognitively understand trauma, but it's another thing to take the trauma from your head to your heart and then to actually experience the feelings that went along with that trauma. So I think that's another piece that people really like appreciate about the work I do, is that we're not looking at it from the cognitive lens of just looking back and like, okay, what happened to you when you were a child? We're actually taking it from, okay, this is what happened, but how did that make you feel? And how do we move through those emotions, right?
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Nadine,
No
for
problem.
expanding into that. And I know you have a specific framework on how you approach things. So please feel free to dive in and walk us through how you work with it and what each of the letters stand for in
Yeah,
HAIRRT.
of course. So years ago, I was sitting and trying to really understand personally what my values were in life, because I think that when we look at values, we kind of find the way to live our life through values, right? So I created HART, which is, it stands for honesty, authenticity, integrity, resoluteness, resiliency, and transparency. And what I found is when I take that framework and I use those values and I bring them into, let's say, a workshop, then we're then able to kind of take a person's life and not to oversimplify it, but we take someone's life and we kind of like go through those heart traits. And I ask people, where are you with honesty? Are you honest with yourself? Are you honest with others? Are you able to show up authentically? Or, sometimes do you put a mask on when you're in spaces with other people because that's what feels okay to you. When we talk about integrity, I mean, that's a big one in the world these days right now, is we talk about integrity in all walks of life, right? So to me, integrity has always meant like, what are you doing when no one's looking at you? It's not when you're in the big groups and you're just, there. It's like, what are you doing when people aren't watching you? Are you holding that integrity? When we talk about resiliency, a lot of people are very resilient and they don't realize that they are resilient because they go through trauma, and then what they do is they kind of put their head down and they just go, well, I've been through so much that I'm just going to keep going. But like, when do we stop and kind of celebrate the resiliency that you have, right? And resoluteness as well. When we look at being resolute, it just means that we're being very resolute in who we are as a person, right? We're being very, very forthright with, our values, our ability to carry those values forward and to speak the truth with resoluteness. And then when we talk about transparency, it's just being transparent with people. You can be authentic with people, but also that transparency piece is really important. And especially from an aspect of, let's say, like a nonprofit or as a practitioner, you want to have some transparency with your clients. Like when people are in session with me, I think one of the things that I've always gotten the highest compliment of is that I share my personal stories with people. I don't hold back, because I think that it's really important for people to understand that I understand some of those trauma pieces and that I've experienced it personally. So I'm not just sitting there going, well, page 42 on my textbook tells me that you're sad right now. I'm actually able to go, okay, I understand that sadness because this is how I empathize with you. This is how I'm correlating it. And let me tell you a personal story about myself so that you can relate with me as well, right? So using those traits has been a really beautiful framework for not only workshops and teaching people about the values, but actually using it in my own personal life and then using it with my clients in sessions as well.
Right. I totally feel that way whenever, let's say, if someone goes through a hard time of losing a loved one. I've gone through it in my life. I lost my mom years ago due to cancer. So when that happens and I open up and I explain or support with what I've gone through and the tools I
Mhm.
used or whatnot, it makes a difference because they feel, or when someone helps me deal with
Mhm.
pain or some
Mhm.
difficult time that I'm going through, if they have gone through it, then it's like, okay, they know how it is to go through it. They have lived through it, right? Rather than
Mhm.
just thinking, oh, it's hard, but it's not the same.
Mhm. No, it's not. And I think that's something that we really need to kind of work on in humanity, is like understanding like we all have those experiences. Maybe they're not the same in terms of like how they happened, but the emotions a lot of the time are very similar. So where can we find that thread in the tapestry so that we can kind of show each other that empathy and that compassion and relate to one another? Because right now, if you look in the world, there's a lot of division. And the way that we find our way back through that division is by unifying. And how we unify is through emotions. We're human beings. And I like to tell people, like, one of the first things I say to people when they come into my office is like, you're not a human doing, you're a human being. So when we can take it from doing to being, we understand that emotions play a very big part in the human experience. And unfortunately, what has happened is a lot of people have shut down their emotional, you know what I mean, space and capacity, because they don't have support, or they didn't learn what emotional intelligence was, or their parents weren't capable of giving them, that emotional support because they had emotionally immature parents. And that's not judgment. It's just an observation of understanding, like, people can only give you what they have in themselves, right?
Yes, that's great as well. I've through the learning and sometimes the way you can evolve through time. In
Mhm.
my perspective, for what I've lived, is whatever past you've had and things you've gone through, maybe through childhood or how you grew up, it doesn't make you the person you are now or the person you've become through time, right? So one
Mhm.
of the things that I really liked from your website through Fire and Grace is what you mentioned at the very bottom. That is, you are not broken, you are becoming. So that's something really powerful and that helps a lot. Like feel that ignition of, okay,
Mhm.
I am at the driver's seat, I have the power, and it's just constant work in progress, because as we grow, as we learn, go through things, we evolve. So that's a great way to summarize it.
I really appreciate that, because when I was building the website, I was like, oh, I'm really hoping that this lands. But like, the more that people see it and the more they come back to me with it, I really feel like it was a beautiful choice. And just to like touch on a piece of that. So I think what happens also these days is that, if you look around you, there's not only divisiveness in the world, but there's also this sense of like a victimization of sorts. And it's not about blaming or shaming. It's about understanding that, like, when a lot of things happen to you and you go through a lot of trauma, and here we go with the personal piece again, I'm going to bring it personally to me, is that when I was going through all my trauma, and I've been through, like I said, quite a bit, like, I went through trauma from when I was born to like through to when I was in my 30s, and of all kinds. And it was hard for me to understand, because what I would do with that is I would victimize myself in that, and I'd be like, well, why is this happening to me? Why does this have to happen to me? And like I said, when I was able to kind of take that different lens approach of like, it happened for me, not to me, which takes a while to do the work to get you there. But then you realize that you're not broken and that you are becoming. And that's part of, like I said, that tapestry of like figuring out what kind of human you want to be, figuring out what kind of person you want to be, how you want to feel, if you want to feel, like, how do we feel, and also feel safe while we're feeling. So there's a lot of pieces that go into that, but I really think that it's so beautiful when you can take someone from that spot of feeling like they're broken and that things are happening to them, to the place where they're becoming and thinking things are happening for them, right?
Yes, yes, that's a great approach. So I really like that.
Thank you.
And well, talking a bit more of how you do work with your clients, and probably it's a good segue to discuss what is the type of approach you have, or individuals. It can be like on a one-to-one basis. It can be, let's say, different individuals, like women, men, just to expand on it and see how you work, what your practice covers.
Yeah, of course. So I exist in this liminal space of psycho spiritual, because I do offer traditional like counseling and coaching, but I also offer a lot of like spiritual practices in that as well. And when I say spiritual, I mean more like, okay, so we're bringing in like breath work, or we're bringing in mindfulness, that kind of spirituality. So I do offer one-on-ones with men and women. I do work with youth. I've worked with youth for quite a while now. I work with some children, although I try to kind of leave that to the specialists, but I have taken on some children. I do family counseling. I do couples counseling. So there is a lot of kind of room. And I won't say no to something. So if somebody comes to me and says like, this is what I need, or this is what I'm feeling, then I'm capable of providing that, then I definitely will. I also offer shamanic divination, which is more like in the spiritual realm of just connecting through indigenous practices to be able to provide, understanding through different lenses for people. So yeah, I work with neuro-linguistic programming, so trauma-informed NLP, which is literally helping someone to take a traumatic memory from their mind and moving it into their long-term memory, so it's no longer kind of ruminating and cycling around, right? So I provide hypnotherapy services as well. So there's a myriad of things that I provide, and what it is that when people come to me and they have their consultation, that's why I'm really thorough with my consultations, because I really want to understand, and I want clients to understand that there is no one approach to healing. So I might have a client in my office, this morning that needed hypnotherapy because they needed to deal with a childhood memory. And then I could have somebody else come in that had somebody pass away that wants to use shamanic divination to kind of connect with that piece. So it's very different how people respond to different therapies and different tools that you use. And it's my job, and I consider it an honor to be able to sit with that person when I do the consultation to figure out what might work best for them.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for expanding on that, Nadine. And well, there's lots of different approaches and quite interesting, some of them that I've never explored, but it's great to know you've got it covered, and interesting to see as well, like the youth support you're providing. I feel sometimes parents, I am a mother, my children are still young, but I feel like when they reach that point in time, it's hard to go through certain things, lots of changes, and also we have busy lives, and maybe at times we just say, oh, they'll figure it out, or it might be just they're going through a tough moment. I maybe had some hard times when I was a teenager, but we do have lots of consciousness nowadays about mental health and how that really impacts ourselves more than we think. So that's really good, an eye opener to know like youth support is there, and we don't need to wait until we're adults to have a
Don't
proactive
wait until
approach,
you're
right?
adults, because otherwise you're going to be getting your kids to pay for a lot of therapy.
Yes, totally. It's just like that trend of being proactive rather than reactive, like with physical health, it's just like the
Yeah.
same thing.
Well, it's
So
exactly the same. And like when we look at, like, let's say like something like generational trauma, we start to understand that sometimes through our lineage or our heritage or our genetics or our epigenetics, we hand down trauma without meaning to. So it's not even like the fact that we do things sometimes to traumatize our children. It's things that are already pre-existing. So it's also just nice to be aware of those things. And I think that the more you can get ahead of something like that, the better. Like with my daughter, I really focused on emotional intelligence. She's 25 now. She has her own baby. She's a
hmm,
beautiful mother. I'm a grandma at this point, and I'm just watching that circle of life happening. And I'm just thankful, that my daughter has the emotional intelligence. Not that, we still don't go to therapy, but because she has that emotional intelligence and we've really like worked throughout the years to help her with that. It's such an important piece for youth to be able to have a safe place where they can talk. And sometimes that's not mom and dad. And we have to be okay with that, as long as we are, kind of looking at the practitioner, making sure it's a healthy relationship for our children. It's such a beautiful tool to bring that in early so that they are not shying away, ashamed of attending therapy.
that's great. Yeah, totally. So another thing that I believe it's great to cover today, and give the audience an overall insight of who you are and all the various things you have been doing. Also, you have an active role supporting healthy workspaces, communities through capillary wave. So
Yeah.
that's another broad of the whole spectrum you have. So please feel free to
Yes. Yeah, not a
elaborate on
problem.
it.
So I joined Capillary a year ago almost. So Nelson Borges started Capillary Wave for Men, and at the time he was just looking for someone. He posted something on Facebook and said, has anyone had any experience with nonprofits or building a nonprofit? And I was like, well, I'm on mat leave right now. I could give some time to this. So we met, and there's like, a couple of chuckles that we have is that like he's the visionary, whereas I'm more like the, okay, but what about the liabilities? Okay, what about like all that stuff that needs to come into it? So I think it freaked him out a little bit at first, but we formed a really great relationship, and that led to me in November becoming the intuitive counselor role for Capillary. At the time, and I'm like the original one, the original counselor that joined on. So I was really honored to do that. And then about 3 or 4 months ago, he actually offered me the executive director position for Capillary Wave Women. So we started the women's support group. And we meet every Tuesday night from 7 to 9 p.m. And it's not group therapy. It's just women coming together in a tribe and community and supporting one another. So that's everything that Capillary stands for. We stand for like holistic health. So understanding the 4 pillars, like it's mental, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's physical, and understanding how to bring those in, not just talking about it, but actually how do we practically bring those things in. So check out Capillary Wave because it's such a great movement, and support groups are free. So you're able to come in, drop in. We have some virtual ones as well. We have one for dads. It's called Dads in the Middle. It's on Thursday nights. I think it's 7:30 to 9:30, and it just helps men that are navigating like divorce or custody situations. And then we have some other virtual things coming up soon. So we're really just trying to navigate and find a way to support as many people as we can, because we understand that like right now is such a sensitive time for humanity, when we're all kind of like looking for answers, seeking to know ourselves better, trying to learn the tools that help us. So yeah, I'm honored to be with Capillary for sure.
Amazing work. So sounds so exciting, and having that virtual component, it's great too, because we know the reach you can have without these barriers of being local are amazing, and the lives you can change and support also will make a change in the world. And below we'll be sharing all these links so they can follow and be in the know of what's happening and going on. So thanks for sharing that, Nadine, and we'll make
Thank
sure
you.
to share all of them with the audience. And probably before it's time to wrap it up, the other thing that comes really part of the conversation, an important topic that I'm trying to learn more within the space, is what is the role that AI/technology plays on your uh, practice? What is your perspective and then your vision for it?
Mhm. So I want to start by saying and just like addressing the elephant in the room, because I think a lot of times when you message or when you mention AI, people like think Skynet, or they like go immediately to like, oh my gosh, like AI is going to take over the world. And well, I can understand and accept that point of view. I also have seen how technology can really help people. So I personally can tell you, like when ChatGPT came out, I was kind of like, oh, like I love curiosity and I love doing research. Like I'm a little bit of a nerd like that. So like ChatGPT really helped me, not in taking out my own brain power, but in like trying to like basically summate or summarize a lot of like, let's say like mental health issues or like problem solving, that can exist within AI. So one of the issues that I have in my practice sometimes is that I'm really good at what I do. And I feel like sometimes I get stretched really thin because I have clients that need me. And I'm not opposed to that. Like I'm one of those practitioners that I do make myself available to clients even after hours, because mental health doesn't just exist in the hour that you come into my room and sit in front of me. It exists like all the time for you. So one of the things that I've been trying to navigate right now, and it's not ready yet, so I'm not going to speak a lot to it, but is just trying to use AI in a way that can help me be supportive to my clients, so that it's not always me having to do that, because then as a human being, I'm going to burn out and get compassion fatigue. So is there a way that I can use an AI tool that it doesn't provide therapy, but what it does is it provides resources and tools for people. So let's say one of my clients at 2 a.m. is having a panic attack and I'm asleep and I'm at that point, I'm not available, but like they can call And this will help them with resources like, do you need a breathing exercise? Can I help you walk through a breathing exercise? Can I help you with a resource, something that you need in your community, or something that you're looking for that you haven't found yet? Or, can we practice a mindfulness piece? So I'm really just exploring that right now. And I really hope to bring that to the forefront to help people understand that, yes, AI can be looked at in those ways, but we can also look at AI in a very positive and supportive way of how can we help it work with us and work with humanity so that we can learn to be better as well.
Yes, it's totally how we frame it and how the we put it together so it comes a benefit that will, in your case, you can leverage your skill set, the all the information you have, the knowledge that will be transferred to others at difficult times. And by that I mean at the example that you mentioned, like at 2 a.m. probably you might be asleep and miss the call or not be available, which is fair. You're a human being, but you will have this tool in place that will have all the information and the best practices you have in what you do from an advice perspective, let's say, rather than just going into chat gpt and looking for stuff that will just do a search all over the internet, which we know not all the information, not all of the things we can find out there are trustful. So
Yes.
in that way it feels like, okay, this can be something that it's vetted by you and some resources or insights that you will provide to
Mhm.
your patients.
Well, and
So looks promising. Yeah,
I love the fact that, sorry to interrupt you, but I
go
just
ahead.
want to say is like, I think what I love about it is that we are learning now to personalize AI. So like the way that I work and who I am and how I speak to people is the exact same way that model is going to learn, through compassion, through empathy. And, I think that's a really big piece for people to understand, because when we think of AI, we sometimes think like, oh, it's cold, oh, it has no soul. But we forget that it's the input that also provides the output, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's totally on point, and I agree from that end and your perspective and how you're framing it and using it to your advantage. And also we can name it. It's so many avenues. Like you can do less work, like admin work, and then have availability for your clients.
I'm
So
not gonna
that's
lie, that
amazing.
part excites me because I really don't like doing all my bookkeeping.
I know that's not fun at all. Those are kind of the things we just procrastinate until the clock is ticking and we need to do it. Amazing. Well, last thing that I want to probably review with you or ask you about to wrap it up is there a final type of thought, advice you might want to give anyone in the audience, maybe a thing to reflect upon or just a final closure?
Yeah, of course. From all my own and personal experience in doing my own healing journey, I just want people to understand what I had said before. And I just want to touch back on it, that there's no one path to healing. There is many paths to healing. And I think that one of the bravest things that we can do as a human being is admit that we are suffering, or admit that we are not coping well, admit that we don't have all the tools. And I think that's brave. I thank everyone that comes into my office for being brave enough to show up for themselves, because they're not showing up for me. Let's be very clear. They're showing up for themselves. So when they walk through this door, when they have the bravery and the courage to look at themselves, to get uncomfortable, that to me is such a beautiful space to be in. And that's why I do the work I do, because I want to sit with you in your discomfort so we can get to the point where you learn what comfort feels like, where you learn what joy feels like, where you learn that happiness feels like. Because let's be very honest about trauma. I mean, we talk about all the negative things that trauma does and how we
Mhm.
need to heal from it. But the discussion that we don't have is that when we go through trauma, yeah, we have sadness, we have anger, we have grief, and those things need to be worked on. But we forget to have the conversation that, like, if we have all those, then we're not able to access our joy. We're not able to access our presence, our happiness. And I think that's a really deep, discussion that needs to be had, is that you come to therapy not only to talk about your trauma, but you come to therapy so you can learn what happiness is, what joy is, and presence and play and letting your inner child out. So, therapy isn't all doom and gloom. It's, a lot of people in my office, we have some really good laughs. Like I've had clients in here where we've laughed for a good 10 minutes, just talking about life and how strange it can be. So I just want people to not be afraid of therapy. And then I also just want to leave you with this caveat of, it also depends on the relationship you have with your therapist. So please do me a favor, all of you listening, and when you choose to go and find a therapist, please interview them like you would, somebody that you want to have for a job. Like, it's an interview process. It's not just take the first one. It's, how do you figure out, do you feel comfortable with this person? Do you feel like they're authentic with you? Do you feel like they're being honest with you? So, like, please understand that it is your choice, the therapist that you work with, and that can also determine the outcome.
Love that advice. I think that's totally on point. And when you want to open yourself, become vulnerable, you really have to find that right person to open to and trust them 100%. Well, Nadine, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thanks for sharing all these beautiful insights, knowledgeable and thoughtful information you have. And I'm sure you're going to hear more about the audience with questions, comments, and how to learn more to heal themselves.
For sure. Thank you so much, Lilia, for having me today. I really
Have a great
appreciate
afternoon. Thanks,
it.
Nadine.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.